Welcome to this introduction to deliberate practice. My name is Richard Himmer, and I'll be your host in today's discussion. Deliberate practice is a model taken out of a book by Dr. Angela Duckworth. The book is called Grit, and I've put this model together based on her research, my research, and a host of other people who've shared their learnings with me. So this is the model. It starts with deliberate practice. But the goal is to get down to what we call flow. In order to get to flow, one must deliberately practice in order to achieve happiness. If one achieves happiness, one gets to joy, but joy and happiness are contained in a state we call well-being. So let's kind of dive into this one and make sense of this. Deliberate practice was coined in such a way that we understand if we get 10,000 hours underneath our belts of doing something, whatever it is, then you become an expert at that something, almost. So this is what they found. If you take three people, all setting out to do the same thing, let's say music is it, and three of them start, they all have a fairly steep growth rate. The learning curve is pretty high, but at some point in time, one of the three, let's say number A, drops out. What we found is most times the person drops out because they lack grit and or they feel helpless, and sometimes the two are combined. But notice the amateur and the expert do make it to 10,000 hours. The difference between the two is how they practiced. The amateur puts in the time, but they don't put it in deliberately. Whereas the expert not only puts in the time, but the expert measures each step, each frame or bar. Measured effort improves. So when they practice, they may practice hours just on the intro. As a runner, do you listen to music and kind of get into it, listen to NPR, or think about what you're going to get at the store on the way home? Or are you measuring it? Are you focused? Are you actually mindfully practicing? There's a huge difference in what we practice. Interesting thought would be, or question would be, do you deliberately practice being happy? Do you deliberately practice being married, being a mother, being a father? Now, for those of you mothers listening to me real quick, this is something you might need to understand. You will say, well, look at Richard, I practice every day. That's all I do is I'm spending it with my children. With all due respect, that's not practice. That's game time. You're actually in the game. Practice would be when you're not with your children. What are you doing to prepare? What are you doing to practice? So often, Little League coaches do all of their coaching while the child's up to bat. That's a terrible time to be teaching a kid how to hit the ball or not to be afraid of the ball. That's what practice is for. So deliberate practice is the methodology whereby one becomes an expert at whatever it is. And it is defined as effortful and narrowly focused. It is challenging, but it's more rewarding than living in a state of addiction or maladaptive behavior. And it is used to pre-plan and prepare for conditions of satisfaction. Now you might say, okay, well, what are conditions of satisfaction? Well, let me give you a quick definition of conditions so it makes sense to you. Conditions of satisfaction are the desired results that you have, they're your results, based on your rules of engagement. Therefore, what are rules of engagement? They are a set of self-established rules governing your behavior. And they are designed to maximize your interpersonal relationships with the intent to build mutual trust and respect. So conditions of satisfaction are the result of the rules you set, meaning that you're going to deliberately practice along the way. Now, our goal is flow. Flow is a state of complete concentration and acceptance. It's like a runner's high. It's like performing at a concert or a recital or a dance festival, and you nail it. Everything you practiced, everything you did, you just got into the flow. You did not have to cognitively think. It happened. That's a state of flow. It's effortless, and it happens as a result of your deliberate practice, and it only exists in a state of well-being. So that means we got to define that as well. So let's back ourselves up a little bit and talk about happiness. I know happiness has got a lot of definitions, and I'm not saying that my definitions are the only way it can be done. What I'm saying is that as I've looked at this one, trying to make sense, of these words that we use in our language, these are very applicable to this model. So while other definitions could be true and maybe are true, I'm suggesting these really work within this construct. So in the process of healing, happiness is a state of being where your behavior is congruent with your goals. In other words, you do what you say you're going to do. If you want to lose 10 pounds, let's say, are you going to go to McDonald's every night? Are you going to eat that extra piece of cake? Are you going to eat past being full? That's basically happiness, because you always regret it. It's a very quick temporary fix. Therefore, joy is deep satisfaction for doing or accomplishing something significant. It's the capacity to behold the results of congruent behavior. Joy, in other words, is a bunch of happinesses strung together. Joy is when you're able to see something, when you're in the flow, if you're at the concert, or if you just run the marathon under 4 hours, or if you've just gone 3 for 3. All right, that's joy. It's a result of all the energy you put in. Joy is agency in action. Well, I've heard the term agency used a lot, and I've often heard it used maybe not so accurately. Agency is the power to act righteously. Now, there's a number of things that come to mind here. Number one, I thought agency had to do with my choice, not so much just acting righteously. So the term agency in and of itself has some meaning that needs to be kind of tightened up, if you will. So I'll give you a metaphor. Let's say, for example, that I'm a free agent. I can play for any football team I want to play for. That's why I'm a free agent. And I get a phone call from an NFL team, say the Seattle Seahawks, and they say, hey, look, we need a backup quarterback. Wilson's got a concussion and he's kind of iffy, so would you be willing to sign a contract? And I say, well, yeah, that works. So I sign on with the Seahawks. And I sign a nice contract, and I'm now a captured agent. I'm a moral agent. I'm an agent to the Seahawks. And then the Broncos come calling and say, hey, look, we need a backup quarterback here too. Can I go and play for the Broncos? I have the ability, naturally, but do I have the right? See, I don't have the right. I've already made a contract with them. I've given them my word. Agency is the power to act within my word. So let's define the word righteously and see how that plays into the story. Righteousness is not a quality, but a relationship based on mutual trust and respect. A righteous person acts justly. Righteousness and justice are at times synonymous. So one thing to take note here is this isn't a religious issue. This is really the ability to establish mutual trust and respect with those within your circle of influence. It's the result of the result of righteous living is trust and peace. Righteousness narrows the distance to happiness and joy, meaning you are building trust and respect starting with self. The first place you build trust and respect is for you. This is all about you. When you focus on you, you're able to be in a state of well-being. It's called civility with boundaries. But now, what does peace mean? Peace is a state of good emotional, physical, and spiritual health. All three are critical to the state of peace. It is a loving relationship between individuals, families, communities, and nations. Peace is neither the peaceful nor the pacifist, but rather the peacemaker. I've known many pacifists who are anything but peacemakers. Peacemakers are armed with neutrality. In other words, what is right, not who is right. Can soothe others and know how to create safe space. Is that you? Can you do that? Or is your life filled because you're just stressed all the time with a lot of criticisms and sarcasms and anger and maybe rage? Do you have to be right? Are you controlling? Are you always judging others or giving your opinions without being asked? Okay, finally we come to well-being. Well-being is emotional, physical, and spiritual safety, where self-trust and self-respect are omnipresent. It is civility with boundaries. So in a nutshell, if you have well-being, it's possible then to have happiness and joy because you're acting congruently with what you say you want. And a whole bunch of those happinesses strung together equal joy. And if you have happiness and joy, as a general rule, you're going to be having boundaries, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. That's because you're taking care of self. So the deliberate practice model basically is running through these different definitions. There's a worksheet that goes along with it. And when people follow this, they bust through addictions, they start mending relationships, they start feeling better, sleeping better, their brain starts clearing because they're able to take care of self. Thanks a lot for joining me. It was a pleasure sharing this with you, and I hope you get in contact with us and stay informed by subscribing to our newsletter. Take care now.